Okay, so Acts chapter 2. Yep, Acts chapter 2, verse 42, which is toward the end. They, that is the Christians, how many, put a hand up if you're a Christian. Put the hand up if you worship Satan.
Think we need more prayer.
Can we pray for my son quickly?
Oh, bless him. Oh, Edward. Edward, I'm going to ask you a nice question that you can answer, all right?
Okay.
Okay, that was just...
They're not on me, Edward.
I don't think he meant
Why did you say this nice?
They, that's the Christians, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. That's why we have teaching, by the way, in church. Because the early Christians were devoted to teaching. And to the fellowship, that's when we all get together. When we all get together, which is not many of us, not many people nowadays are devoted to the fellowship. Yeah. And one thing that COVID has shown is that people aren't really dedicated to fellowship.
But we are.
Yes, well done, those of you. Yeah, we're preaching to the people that are. To the breaking of bread, well, we are dedicated to that. And we would have broken bread today, but it was Mel's turn and she's just not feeling wonderful. So we don't just do it for ritual. We do it because we believe in the actual bodily presence of Christ in those things, those symbols. To prayer. How many are dedicated to prayer? Everyone was filled with awe. Right, so that's maybe just one problem we have at the moment. We're not quite filled with awe as what God's doing. But, you know, I'm going to talk about that. Awe is when you go, wow! That's awe. Do you know when something really great happens and you go, wow!
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awe. That's
How are you
awe.
doing?
But it has to be, I mean, when was the last time you saw or heard of something that you thought, wow, that's awesome?
When Darcy was born.
Oh, was it a birthing pool?
Yeah, that
Awesome, awesome.
I was like, wow, there she is.
She popped out. That's awesome. Birth is awesome. Anything else that's awesome?
When somebody doesn't die from a huge height.
Yeah, doesn't die when they fall from a height. Gosh, yeah, that would be awesome. I wouldn't want to. Yeah, Edward.
When my mum got born, she was like this.
I tell you who popped out and looked around the room and went, that was Abigail.
Sophia did exactly the same thing. She was just like, hello.
It was hello there.
Do you know what I think's awesome? The fact that I wake up every morning.
Well done. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. That's probably where we're falling down there on the awesome side. We need to be doing a lot more signs and wonders, but we can't do signs and wonders in our own strength. We can only do signs and wonders through faith in Jesus, you know, and that's part of the prayer thing, is saying, Lord, what do you want me to do today? And he might say, just go and pray for that person. He might give you a word for a person. He might say, that person is an angry person, or that person is afraid of the dark, and he might give you a word and you can pray into that situation. But it takes a lot of guts to go up to somebody, doesn't it, and say, excuse me, are you afraid of the dark? God just told me you're afraid of the dark. And quite often when I've done that in the past, I've prayed for people, the Lord's told me something about them, and I've prayed and they've gone, oh, no, I'm not. I don't know. And you think, I'm not sure about that. I think you might be, I might have touched a sore spot. Where are we? Verse 44. All the believers were together and held everything in common. So nobody thought of anything that they owned as being theirs. It was all held in common. We don't do that anymore. We've sadly gone past that point. Monks, monastic living in community, was people trying to get back to that early church thing of where they lived and held everything together in common. They sold property and possessions to give anyone who had need. Well, we're not in a position to sell property because I'm pretty sure none of us own property. Is that right? Anybody own property? So we are right at the bottom of the pile. Sadly, nobody owns anything. So, but we can hold what we have in common, which is not a lot. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Well, we're not meeting in our home, we're meeting in the hub. And I want us to get back to a position where we have to meet in a big hall again. And I firmly believe that if we just stay faithful, that will happen. There are people who've left who are going to come back, and new people are going to come. There are people, godly people, who every Sunday get in the car and drive to Hull to go to Jubilee Church. I mean, how silly is that? And it's like half an hour's drive. I said, fine, it's a great snazzy church. It's got loads of money. It's got good worship, good musicians, just like we have. They even pay their worship people. I'd love to be able to do that. But if everybody just drops in their car and all of you drive to a big church, then what happens is the local neighbourhood suffers.
Yeah.
It suffers. And we need to be an Acts chapter 2 church where we're seeing signs and wonders and we're seeing things happening in the community. And part of the main reason we have a hub is we want to do stuff in the community. We don't just want to be a church where religious people gather and go through the rituals. Because if that happens, what will happen is we will lose generations. And then you end up with just an elderly church. And then that elderly church starts to die because the people get old and die. We can't have that. We've always been a church of all the generations here. We have to keep going and treasure that. Uh-oh.
Cry, baby.
47. They were praising God. Oh no. They were praising God and enjoying the favour of all the people, and the Lord added to their number every day those who were being saved. That's what I want. The first day in Acts chapter 2, 3,000 were added. And then every day after that, new people were being added in. That's what I want to see. If you look in the UK, there aren't any churches like that now, that people are being added every day. But in Africa, it's happening. And Reinhard Bonnke, I know he's died now and gone to be with the Lord, but the guy who took over his ministry his name has just flown out of my head, but come back. They regularly have gatherings of hundreds of thousands of people, and they regularly see thousands of people saved at the meetings. Regularly. So it's happening. It's just not happening in England at the moment. But that's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. And so that's one side of church life. That's a church that's vibrant, that's growing. And I want to look at another side and contrast the two. So let's go to 1 Kings 17. 1 Kings 17. 1 Kings 17. This is the flip side of the story. Now we're looking at Elijah. Elijah was a prophet in the days of King Ahab. Has anyone heard of King Ahab?
Yeah,
Was he a good king or a bad king?
he was a bad kid.
He was a very bad king. What was his wife's name? Do you remember?
No.
Anyone remember?
Isn't that the one you was preaching about a couple of weeks back? It was.
Begins with a J. If you call a woman this, she will be offended.
Jezebel.
Jezebel. His wife's name was Jezebel, and she was exceedingly wicked. And she was the one he was a weak king, so she led him astray into wickedness. And so her name has now become a byword for a wicked and evil woman, Jezebel. That's what she was. So that's the days that Elijah was living in. And the people of Israel had turned away from God. They turned their back on God. Jezebel had encouraged the worship of Baal. Baal was a god of the Canaanites who God forbade Israel to worship. He said, do not worship Baal. And yet they were worshipping Baal. Okay, so we pick up the story in 1 Kings 17 verse 1. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. Who would like to be a prophet like that? Where whatever you said came to pass.
Me?
Yeah, so you could just go along to the Queen and say, I am the prophet of the Lord. It will not rain in England unless I say so. Imagine that.
Darcy will not cry unless I say so.
Are you tired, Darcy?
Yes, I think so.
Oh dear.
Cutting that out.
Oh dear.
That's like where this is.
Then the word of the Lord came to... So Elijah didn't just make that up. The word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and tell Ahab it's not going to rain until I say so. It's going to be a drought. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Leave here, turn eastward and hide in the Kerioth ravine east of the Jordan. You can drink from the brook, and I have instructed the ravens to supply you with food there. Kids, why do you think he had to hide? Why would you think Elijah would have to hide?
They're going to try and kill him.
Correct. Why do you think they were going to try and kill him?
Because he was evil.
No, Elijah wasn't evil. Who was evil?
The king.
The king. And who else was evil?
The king's wife.
The king's wife, right. So Elijah, who was not evil, he was the Lord's prophet, had to hide because the king wanted to kill him. And who else wanted to kill him?
The
The
queen.
king's wife.
That's right, his wife Jezebel. They both wanted to kill him. So God said, go and hide
They wanted
in the
to kill him because he
ravine.
was
We'll
God.
get you next. So he went to the ravine. And God said, I'm going to send Burger King round every week with burgers, and I'll send Pizza Express with pizzas. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
No. What
I
did
want a burger.
what did God say?
He's going to supply. He's
Imagine.
going to instruct ravens to supply him with food.
Would you like to eat food that crows, because ravens and crows are the same thing, that crows are brought for you?
No.
You see crows eating roadkill on the side of the
I
road.
know.
and stuff like that. I don't want that.
They sort of bring, here's a bit of roadkill for you, Elijah. But God said do it, and he did it, and it was okay. But if God said that to me, I'm not quite so sure I'd be entirely pleased with it. But we have to do what the Lord says, don't we?
We do.
And so he stayed there, verse 5. He did what the Lord had told him and went to the Kerioth ravine at the east of Jordan and stayed there. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning. So they brought him bread. I don't know where they got it from.
It's still horrible bread, I would imagine.
Well, where would they get it from as well? But it might be really nice bread because God had said God might have
It
given
might
them the
have come
bread.
from the town. They might have stolen from the town.
God might have given them the bread. Anything could have happened. We just don't know. And meat in the morning, and meat every evening, and he drank from the brook. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Well, Elijah, you said there wasn't going to be any rain, so brook dries up, and he goes, oh, nothing to drink now. And so the word of the Lord came to him, go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon. So he has to leave Israel, where the drought is, and go to Sidon. Does anyone know where Sidon is?
Nope.
Have you heard of Tyre and Sidon?
No.
No? Well, Tyre and Sidon, two cities, in what is now called the Lebanon. Has anyone heard of the Lebanon? No. Well, get your map out and go and have a look. The Lebanon is immediately north of Israel. So you go to the north, Galilee. Anyone heard of Galilee?
Yes.
Galilee's in the north, and you keep going north, you go over the border, and you're in Lebanon. And then you come to Tyre and Sidon. Okay? It's a geography lesson. So he's been told by God to leave where he is, leave Israel altogether, and go into Tyre and Sidon. Go to Zarephath in the region of Sidon, stay there. I've instructed a widow there to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath, and when he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. So he called her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so that I may have a drink? As she was going to get it, he called, and bring me please a piece of bread. So he was just asking for bread and water. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug, and I'm gathering a few sticks to take home, make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. So obviously, even though they're not in Israel, the drought is beginning to affect the surrounding nations, and she has no more bread left, only a tiny bit of flour and some oil. She's going to make some bread, unleavened bread with that, and they're going to eat it. And then what's going to happen next, Annabelle?
They're going to
I'm gonna die.
She's going to die. What's she going to die of, Annabelle?
hydration.
Starvation.
Starvation, correct.
Because you only have bread.
She only had a little flour left. Good. Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have, and bring it to me. And then you make something for yourself and your son." Well, there's not enough flour for her to make anything more than a small loaf. And so he says to her, "Make me a loaf first. First make me a loaf. And then whatever's left over," well, there's nothing left over, "you can make something for you and your son to eat. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel says, that jar of flour will not be used up, and that jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." So she had to believe and have faith that the jar of oil and the jar of flour would not run dry, and they didn't. And we're talking years, because there was no rain in the land for 3 years, and Elijah was fed by the ravens only for a matter of some months. So that jar of flour didn't run out of flour, and that jar of oil didn't run out of oil for over 2 years.
Wow.
They just continued to make. And Jesus talks about this story in his ministry, and he says, God didn't send Elijah to anybody in Israel, but to a Gentile in the land of Tyre and Sidon, and they didn't like him for that reason. But the thing of that story is there are two. If we contrast those two stories, we read this first. What was the first story about? Anyone that we read? Go on, Crystal.
Was it about the evil king?
No, that's the second story about the evil king. First story, Annabelle.
Oh,
Forgotten already?
about
Edward?
I forgot his name. The bread.
No, long before the bread.
About
It's been a long day, I
I
know.
forgot his name.
It was about the early church,
Oh yeah.
and they ate bread together, then they had communion together, and they fellowship together, and then God was adding to their number every day. It's good times. Hey, good time church. You know what? We'd like that, wouldn't we? Every single day some new person comes in, and then some more.
Yeah.
Then we have to move out to a bigger place, and then some more new people come, then a bigger place, and we have to build a place because it's nowhere big enough, and then some more people come.
Brilliant.
They're the good times.
Yeah.
And then contrast that with the story of Elijah. Was Elijah in good times?
No.
What was he in bad times?
Yeah.
Why was he in bad times?
He was living on the because
Because,
he had no food.
yeah, well, that's one reason.
He
But,
had to ask people for food.
He was being hunted down by the king and queen.
yep. Good. So that's why it's bad for him. But why was there a drought?
Because of the king and queen, they were being they're being like super bad.
They're just
Really?
super bad. They're just wicked, yeah.
Because God told Elijah that it wouldn't rain until God told Elijah that it would rain.
That's it. So the consequence is Elijah had to struggle through hard times, and he couldn't see any growth. People weren't coming to Elijah every day and to be saved. All of like our nation, they turned away from the Lord. We now have what's known as media morality. The media, social media, BBC, whatever media you want to think of, says what the morals of the nation should be. No one listens to the word of the Lord anymore. No one's interested in what morality comes from Scripture and obeying it. That's all gone out the window. So the days we're living in is more like the days of Elijah. These are the days of Elijah. They really are the days of Elijah, but not the days of Elijah in the song, but the days of Elijah when he was in the brook being fed by ravens. But do you notice one thing about those days? One special thing. Anybody can answer this. Something special about God's provision for Elijah.
Never lets him down.
Never lets
Always provides for him.
never lets him down. And he provides raven food. And if you don't like raven food, you can go to Zarephath and you can have some flour and oil food out of the jar that never runs out. And God is our provider. He's the God who even in the hard times when we're struggling and when we're just down to the few, He's a God who says, I'm never going to let you down. I'm never going to forsake you. I'm never going to leave you. You're never going to be hungry. Well, you might be hungry, but you're never going to starve to death.
Yeah.
You're never going to, you just rely on me. Just put your faith in me. And the days of Acts will return. The days of Acts are going to return. I don't know when. I don't know how long we have to go through this season of leanness. I don't know. But God will be faithful to us in this season of leanness. And we will never lack food to eat, clothes on our back, homes to live in. We're not. We can testify, can't we, Mel, that we do not lack money. No. The hub is very well financed, and all that's been through the grace of God. When other organisations are struggling, other churches are closing. Grace Church closed down. Other leaders have left their posts. See, you can't build in the time of the storm. The time of the storm tests the building. You can't build in the time. You have to build before the time of the storm, and then when the storm comes, it will test the building.
Amen.
And then you will see what the foundations really are.
Yeah.
Now, who are the foundations of the church? That's good. Us is a good answer. Some more answers? Go on then.
The people in the room.
Yeah. Annabelle?
The Christians.
The Christians. Anybody else? Edward?
The ones who were dedicated.
Jesus.
Jesus is good. Jesus is a good foundation. But the day-to-day foundations of the church are its leaders. And what does Jesus say about the foundations of the house when the storm comes?
It will not be moved.
If,
Built on solid rock.
who's the rock?
God.
Jesus.
Right, Jesus. And if it was built on sand, what happens?
Comes
It
tumbling
would-
down.
Comes
It will
tumbling
come
down.
down.
Yeah. So the foundation that we build, the people that we have as our foundation people are the key people. And when the storm comes, then you see who is on sand and who is on the rock of Christ.
Yeah.
And the ones that run away, that actually in John 10 you can read it, the ones that run away are Jesus calls hirelings. They're just in it for the money or the position or the dog collar or whatever. And when the difficult times come, they run away. And another parable, Jesus says, the house that's built upon the sand will fall. But you can't tell that a house is built upon sand or the rock until the storm comes.
Yeah.
They both look great. When the sun's shining, they both look great. And the Lord is adding to the number. And you see, the other thing is, the early church was on fire. It was on fire. Lord, of course you'd be on fire. You're doing miracles. God says, heal that man and speak healing into his life, and you put your hand on him and his wrist is immediately healed. And then you go to the next one and that's healed, and you're on fire. And what was the next thing that happened to the church in Acts straight after this? What happened to it? It was on fire.
Like a ball.
Do you know what happened, Annabelle?
A ball's on fire.
Or are you just guessing? Does anyone know what happened next?
I didn't hear the question because that's it.
Okay, the question is, what happened next after the passage we read in Acts when the church was on fire and it was growing and
Yes.
things were happening? Guess what happened next?
Storm come.
A storm came. A storm came, and the church was, it says in Acts, if you read on, the church was scattered throughout all Judea and different countries as well, not even just Judea, but further abroad.
Even England.
Even to England. Well, according to legend, yes, actually, to Glastonbury, but that's another story. And God says, right, I'm going to stoke this fire up to the max, till it's really burning, and then I'm just going to scatter it. Why would you do that? Why would you break it up and scatter it?
Test.
not just a test, but think about it. What if you get a fire really hot and scatter it?
Even you spread
Spread
the
it.
fire across.
Just you spread the
building
fire,
fires.
and on a new fire start. Exactly that. That's exactly what happened. And they went into Alexandria, which is, I think that's near Egypt, but don't quote me on that. Might even be in Egypt. And Christians were first called Christians, not in Acts where the church started, but was it Alexandria? Wherever it was, another place. Because these hot coals have been scattered everywhere, and they started new fires. And so that's why you have these seasons of building and testing the building. And we've had our building has not done well in this season of testing. And that's really my fault, because I put in people who were not of the sort of foundation that was going to stand the time of testing. And God's had a word with me about that, and I'm very sorry about that. I won't do that again. But if we carry on, God will be not only faithful to us in the time that we're being fed by ravens, but we will come again into a season of growth and a season of building. But we can't build now. This is a time of testing of the foundations, a time of storm. And when the storm's over, hopefully in 2022,
It would be soaking wet.
we can build again. That's right, soaking wet. Okay. And I'm standing on a rock, oh, the rock of ages, standing on a rock, oh, the rock of ages, standing on a rock that'll never change. No, he'll never change.